Before we begin, let the silence settle around you. Not the kind you hear, the kind you feel crawling into the corners of the room. The story I'm about to tell wasn't meant to be spoken out loud. Someone carried it alone for far too long, afraid that saying it would make it real again. If a piece of their truth touches something you've kept buried, you can tell me in the comments. And if these quiet shadows keep pulling you back, you can like the video, subscribe, and tap the bell icon. Now don't move. Some memories wake up when they're listened to. I'm 32 now, living in a cramped apartment above a laundromat 2 towns over from Rapid Creek. And I still freeze when my phone vibrates at night. Even if it's just a spam call or a notification, my chest tightens, my hand hesitates. I wait to see the time on the screen. If it's anywhere near 11:40 p.m., I let it ring. Back then I was 24, broke, and working the late shift at a small gas station off Highway 19. Rapid Creek isn't famous for anything, just a cold little place with too many empty houses and one main road that always smelled like diesel and wet asphalt. I used to joke that the gas station felt more like a waiting room than a business. People came in, bought what they needed, and left like they were escaping something. New Year's Eve was supposed to be easy money. Double pay, barely any customers. I remember thinking I'd use that extra cash to finally fix the heater in my apartment. It was one of those nights where the cold doesn't just sit on your skin. It sinks into your bones. Every time the door opened, a slice of winter cut straight through the aisles. Around 10:30, it was dead quiet. No cars on the lot. No one at the pumps. Just the buzzing hum from the beer cooler and that faint, metallic rattle from the old AC unit that we never turned on in winter but somehow still made noise. I was wiping down the counter when my phone rang. Not the landline. My own phone. Unknown number. The screen lit up the way it always does, but something about it felt wrong. Maybe it was the silence in the store, or the way the fluorescent lights overhead flickered every now and then, but my gut clenched. I should have listened to that feeling. Instead, I sighed, rolled my eyes and answered. Hello. Nothing. Just a faint sound, like a microphone rubbing against fabric. Then breathing. Slow. Soft. Too close to the speaker. Not the casual breathing you hear when someone forgets to talk. This was deliberate, controlled, almost like whoever it was wanted me to hear every inhale, every exhale. Hello, I said again, sharper this time. Look, if this is a prank. Click. The call ended. I stared at the screen for a second, annoyed more than anything. It was New Year's Eve. People were already drinking, already bored. I told myself it was just some kids dialing random numbers. I slipped my phone back into my pocket and went back to wiping fingerprints off the glass countertop. 10 minutes later, it rang again. Same unknown number. Same cold weight in my stomach. This time I answered with, "Who is this?" The breathing was heavier now, wet somehow, like the person on the other end had just run up a flight of stairs or had something in their throat. I could hear the faintest little whistle in the exhale. "Not funny," I snapped. "I'm at work. Stop calling." Nothing, just breath. Then the faintest sound, like something moist shifting near the mic. A tongue? Lips? I don't know. My hand tightened around the phone. My eyes started roaming the store without me telling them to. Rows of chips, canned soup, windshield fluid, lottery scratchers on the counter. Empty. I hung up first. By 11, the snow had started again. Thin, dry flakes blowing sideways against the windows, tapping softly against the glass like fingers. I made a round through the aisles, pretending I was doing inventory but really just needing to move. My shoes squeaked slightly on the linoleum. The overhead speakers played some old rock station in low volume, cutting in and out with static like the signal was struggling through the storm. I checked the cameras out of habit. For grainy feeds, one on the parking lot, one on the front door, 2 inside covering the aisles. Nothing unusual, just rows of products and the glare of the lights reflecting on the floor. At 11:27, my phone rang again. Same number. This time I didn't want to answer, but my thumb moved on its own. You know that feeling when you're watching yourself make a bad decision and can't stop it? I raised it to my ear, already angry. I swear if you don't. The breathing was louder, closer. I could hear moisture, like spit clicking between teeth. Each inhale sounded thick, like something was rattling in their chest. I stepped back behind the counter, pressing my spine against the cigarette wall. Who are you? I whispered without meaning to. How did you get my number? For a moment, there was just that wet, steady breathing. Then, a sound I still hear in my dreams. A small, wet chuckle. Not full laughter. Just a short, broken sound squeezed out between teeth, like it hurt them to find it funny. I hung up so fast I almost dropped the phone. By then, my heart was beating in my throat. My skin felt too tight, too hot, even though the air in the station was freezing. I kept telling myself it was nothing, that I was overreacting, that it was just some idiot drunk dialing numbers for fun. But every time I tried to go back to normal, my eyes were dragged back to the door, to the windows, to the dark shape of the parking lot beyond the glass. At 11:40 p.m., the power flickered. The lights dimmed, buzzed, and then cut out completely for half a second. Long enough for everything to disappear. The sound of the radio died. The hum of the cooler vanished. Just pure, suffocating quiet. Then the emergency backup kicked in. Not all the lights came back, just a few. One near the counter and a couple in the aisles. They flickered weakly, casting long, shaky shadows that made the shelves look taller, closer. The gas station felt smaller somehow, caved in, like the darkness outside had pressed up against the glass and was waiting for a way in. That should have been my first real warning. I was still staring up at the flickering lights when the landline rang. Not my cell, the station phone. The sudden shrill sound sliced through the quiet and I actually jumped. The receiver sat on the back counter, an old, grease-stained thing with a curled cord that always tangled. I stared at it for a few rings, my mind blank. Then muscle memory took over. I picked it up. Rapid Creek Fuel. This is... I'm already inside. The voice was low, wet, like it had been dragged through something rotten before spilling out of the speaker. It didn't sound like a question. It sounded like a statement, a fact. I don't remember dropping the phone, but I must have, because the next thing I remember is the hollow clatter of plastic on the floor and the dial tone humming softly from somewhere near my feet. The store suddenly felt too quiet, the kind of quiet that has weight. My own breathing sounded too loud in my ears. I could hear my pulse in my neck, in my fingertips. I forced myself to move. Slowly, I leaned over the counter and looked down the main aisle. The half-dead lights cast patches of pale yellow across the rows of snacks and canned food. Between those patches, shadows pooled in the corners, thick and still. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Not the clean, even tap of sneakers. These were heavy, uneven. One foot landing solid, the other dragging like it was being pulled along. The sound came from somewhere around aisle 3, the cleaning supplies and paper towels. Thump, drag. Thump, drag. My throat went dry. My first instinct wasn't to call the police. It wasn't to grab a weapon. It was to hide. I backed away from the counter, my shoes barely making a sound. My hand brushed against the keys on my hip and they jingled, far too loud in that suffocating silence. The footsteps paused. I stopped breathing. For a few seconds, the whole world shrank down to the buzz of the emergency lights and the faint ringing in my ears. Then the footsteps started again. Closer this time. Slow. Deliberate. I moved. There was a small storage room in the back. Just a narrow metal door that led to shelves of extra stock, a mop bucket, and a side exit that technically worked but was almost always blocked with boxes. I slipped through the employee-only doorway like a shadow, trying not to let it swing back and slam. The storage room smelled like damp cardboard and bleach. The air was colder back there, the concrete floor leaching heat through my shoes. I shut the door as quietly as I could, then turned the lock with trembling fingers. Click. The tiny sound felt like a gunshot. I killed the light inside the storage room. The darkness was instant and complete, but somehow I felt safer not seeing anything. I pressed my ear against the thin metal door, my palms flat against it to steady myself. The footsteps reached the back of the store. Thump, drag. They were slower now, exploring. I could hear them passing each aisle, the faint rustle of something brushing against plastic packaging. At one point, something heavy scraped against the floor, like a hand or something else dragging along the tiles. I don't know how long I stood there, forehead against the cold door, counting my own breaths and trying not to sob. Time didn't move normally. Seconds stretched out, thin and fragile. My legs ached, my back screamed, but I couldn't move, couldn't risk making a sound. At some point, the footsteps stopped directly on the other side of the door. The weight on the other side was real. You can feel when a presence is that close, even through metal. The air changed, felt thicker, harder to pull into my lungs. I clamped a hand over my mouth to muffle the little gasps sneaking out between my teeth. Silence. Then something scraped slowly along the metal, right by my face, like fingernails, or bone, or something harder. The sound set my teeth on edge, sent electric shivers shooting down my spine. It moved from the top of the door to the bottom, unhurried, like whoever or whatever it was had all the time in the world. I told myself it was a person, that it had to be, that this was just some sick prank, a robber trying to scare me, anything human. Because the alternative, the way the voice had sounded on the phone, the way the breathing had felt in my ear, none of that fit into anything normal. I don't know when I started crying. I just remember the warmth of tears rolling down my cold cheeks and the way they made my face sting in the frigid air. I tried not to sniff, tried not to move. At one point, the scraping stopped. For a few agonizing minutes, there was nothing. Then I heard it again, the breathing. Not through a phone this time, through the door. Heavy, wet, too close. It exhaled so hard I felt the vibration through the metal. I don't remember deciding to do it, but I started praying. Not out loud, just in my head. Every half-remembered line from childhood. Every desperate promise. If you let me live, I'll quit this job. I'll move. I'll do better. Please. Eventually, the footsteps moved away. Thump, drag, thump, drag. They grew softer, heading back toward the front. I didn't move. Not when I heard the distant creak of the front door. Not when the cold wind whistled faintly through the gap. Not when the emergency lights flickered again and the hum of the cooler sputtered back to life as the power fully returned. I stayed there until the black outside the tiny high window started to turn the faintest shade of gray. Until I saw the first hint of pale winter morning. When I finally unlocked the door, my fingers barely worked. I stepped back into the store on legs that didn't feel like mine. The aisles were exactly how I'd left them. No knocked-over displays. No muddy footprints. The front door was locked from the inside. The parking lot was empty, covered in a thin dusting of snow. No tire tracks. No shoe prints. Nothing. The landline still lay on the floor behind the counter, the receiver off the hook. The dial tone hummed steadily, like none of it meant anything. The cops came later, after my manager arrived and found me sitting on the floor behind the counter, wrapped in a thin company jacket and staring at the door like it might open on its own. I don't remember calling him. I don't remember much of what I said to the officers, either. They checked the cameras. Every angle. Every recorded second between the first call and sunrise. No one came in. No one walked between the aisles. No one approached the storage room door. They shrugged it off eventually, said it was probably a glitch in the feed, or some kids messing with the phones, or me panicking because of the blackout. One of them gave me that look people give you when they think you're fragile but don't want to say it. I quit 2 weeks later, moved out of town a month after that. It's been years now, and I still can't fully explain what happened that night. I don't work nights anymore. I don't celebrate New Year's. I don't answer unknown numbers. And every year, without fail, on December 31st, at exactly 11:40 p.m., my phone rings. Same vibration, same unknown number. I never answer, but if I hold the phone close enough, if I let the screen light up my hand, sometimes I swear I can hear it. The faintest, wettest little sound leaking through the speaker. Breathing. Waiting. I'm 36 now, and I still check the snow outside my porch before I open the door. Every winter, every single night the temperature drops below freezing, I pause with my hand on the knob and look down through the little sidelight window, just to see if anything's there. Most nights, there's nothing. New Year's is different. Back then, when this happened, I was 29 and convinced that being alone was the same thing as being free. I'd just come out of a messy breakup, quit a job I hated, and rented a cheap cabin near a frozen lake in the middle of nowhere because I told myself I needed space to reset. That was the word I kept using, reset. Like I was a machine that could just be turned off and on again. The cabin was old. You could smell it as soon as you stepped inside. Dry wood, faint mildew from the crawl space. The sour ghost of old cigarette smoke sunk into the walls. The kind of place where the floorboards remembered every person who'd walked over them. It had one bedroom, a kitchenette, a tiny living room, and big windows that looked out to the lake and the tree line beyond. The nearest town was 15 minutes by car. The nearest actual neighbor was a guy with a hunting shack somewhere across the lake. But I never once saw his lights on. The rental agency told me people mostly used it for summer fishing trips. No one stuck around in winter. Too cold, they'd said, half laughing. Too quiet. That New Year's week, the cold was brutal. -17 at night, the kind of cold that made the glass shutter and the metal door handle bite your skin. Wind slid through every crack in the old wood like a knife. The heater hummed constantly, rattling sometimes like it was struggling to keep up. I remember that night so clearly because it started so normal. It was about 11:50 p.m. I had a cheap beer open, some mindless comedy playing low on the TV, my phone face down on the coffee table. No parties, no friends, just me and the sound of the wind hitting the cabin in slow, heavy gusts. Every time the wind surged, the walls sighed like an old man shifting in his sleep. When midnight hit, I could hear distant fireworks from town, little pops and crackles echoing through the trees, dull and far away. I turned the TV down even more and just listened for a minute. Somewhere in my chest, something ached. I told myself I wasn't lonely. I told myself this was what I wanted. I lied to myself a lot back then. Around 12:30, after the last firework fizzled out and the world went quiet again, I heard it. Crunch. At first I thought it was just the house settling or ice sliding off the roof. Old places make weird noises. But then it came again. Closer. Crunch. 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 Footsteps. Slow. Measured. Not running, not stumbling. Just coming. My skin prickled instantly. The TV suddenly felt too loud, even though it was barely above a whisper. I grabbed the remote and muted it. The heater hummed. The wind hissed faintly around the frame of the windows, and underneath all of that was the sound of compacted snow under weight. Someone was walking outside my cabin. I sat there on the couch, holding my breath like that would make me invisible. My eyes moved to the front door. It was just a basic wooden door with a narrow vertical window beside it. Frosted glass, but not enough to hide shapes if they got close. The footsteps stopped. I waited for a knock, a call, a voice, something. Nothing came. I don't know how long I sat there, every muscle locked, listening to the empty air. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I told myself it was probably someone drunk from the lake road, got turned around, thought this was somebody else's cabin. I told myself a lot of things. The problem was, I didn't have neighbors, not within miles. Curiosity and stupidity wear the same mask sometimes. I got up. The floor was cold even through my socks. Each step felt loud, even though I was trying to move quietly. My fingers tingled from the temperature drop near the door. The closer I got, the more aware I became of how thin that wood really was, how flimsy the lock was, how alone I actually was. I stopped right before the door and leaned to the side, peeking through the small gap where the curtain didn't quite cover the window. I saw nothing. No shadow. No movement. Just the porch, half buried in snow, and the washed-out reflection of my own face in the glass, pale and wide-eyed in the faint light from inside. Still, the hair on my arms was standing up. I could feel something in the air, a kind of pressure, like the world was holding its breath with me. I should have called someone. The rental agency. The sheriff's office. Anyone. I didn't. Instead, I undid the chain and unlocked the deadbolt with shaking fingers and opened the door just an inch. The cold hit me first. A knife-edged rush of air knifed into the warm, stale cabin and wrapped around my bare arms, dragging goosebumps up my skin. The smell of snow and pine and something metallic slipped in with it. I pushed the door open a little more and looked out. It was so quiet I could hear my own breath. The night sky was a dark, thick blanket with no stars, clouds swallowing any moonlight. The porch light cast a weak yellow cone on the snow right in front of the cabin, fading into gray about 6 or 7 feet out. And there they were, footprints. A single trail of prints led from the edge of the trees all the way to my doorstep. Even in the ugly porch light, I could see they were wrong. They were too long. Each one looked stretched, like whoever made them had a foot that wasn't shaped right. The toes, or what should have been toes, were narrow and dragged just enough to leave thin grooves. The prints sank deeper than mine ever did, even when I wore boots. Whatever had walked up to my cabin was heavy. Too heavy. My brain did this stupid thing where it tried to make it fit into something normal. Huge boots, snowshoes, some kind of animal track distorted by melting. But the edges were sharp, clean, fresh, and there were no prints going back. Just a single path coming straight from the woods, stopping at my door. My breath fogged out in a shaky white cloud. I scanned the tree line, but the darkness between the trunks was thick and solid, like something poured there had set. "Hello," I called out, my voice sounding way too small. "Is someone out there?" The sound disappeared into the trees without an echo. I don't know what I expected. A laugh, a shout, a slurred apology, a pair of headlights flicking on somewhere. I got nothing. I looked down again, following the line of prints with my eyes. From the woods, to my porch, to exactly where I was standing. And I realized the last print wasn't on the step. It was right against the door. The distance between that final impression and the wooden threshold was almost non-existent, like whatever made it had been standing flush against the entrance. Right where I was. The skin on the back of my neck went hot and cold at the same time. I stepped back and shut the door. Not gently this time. I slammed it, turned the lock, slid the chain back on with clumsy fingers. The heater's steady hum suddenly felt thin and far away. That's when I heard it. A faint, slow scraping along the outside wall, starting near the door, moving sideways. It sounded like something hard dragging across old wood. Not claws exactly, not metal, something in between. The vibrations traveled through the studs and into my fingertips where I held the edge of the door frame. Scrape, scrape, scrape. The sound moved along the front wall, then down the side of the cabin. I could track its path by sound alone, like tracing the outline of a predator circling its prey. I turned off the TV. Every light suddenly felt like an invitation, so I left only one lamp on in the corner and stood in the center of the room, not sure where to go, which direction felt the least dangerous. My mind was racing with useless options. Call 911, call the rental office, grab a knife from the kitchen, run to the car. But the car was outside, past the porch, past those prints. Scrape, scrape, it reached the window. The glass behind me gave off the faintest shiver. I didn't need to look to know it was right there, just on the other side of the thin pane, hidden by the curtain and the reflection of the lamp. I imagined something tall pressed against the siding, head tilted, listening. I told myself I was fine. I wasn't. I backed away from the windows and went for the bedroom because it was the only room with a lock on the door. The floorboards complained under my weight, each creak sounding like it could give me away. I shut the bedroom door, turned the flimsy little knob lock, and slid down to the floor with my back against it. The scraping started again, this time traveling behind the headboard wall. The sound was closer there, more intimate. I could hear the grain of the wood protesting whatever was rubbing against it. At some point, the scraping stopped and was replaced by a new sound. Slow, heavy breathing. Not in my head this time, not imagined. I could feel the slight tremor of it through the thin walls, like the cabin itself was inhaling and exhaling around me. Every tiny hair on my body stood on end. I pressed my palm against the wall beside the door, and I swear I felt the faintest vibration with each exhale, like something large was leaning against the outside, studying me. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't move from behind that door. The heater cycled on and off, the air in the bedroom turning stale and too warm. But I was still shaking, my fingertips numb with cold sweat. The scraping started and stopped all the way until dawn. Sometimes it circled the cabin in a deliberate, measured path. Sometimes it lingered near the front door, dragging back and forth in small, slow movements, like it was drawing patterns I couldn't see. It never knocked. It never tried to break in. It just paced. When the first thin light of morning filtered pale and blew through the curtains, the sounds finally stopped. Just like that. No retreating footsteps. No crack of branches. Just absence. I waited another hour before I worked up the courage to open the bedroom door. The living room looked exactly the same. Lamp on. TV black. Empty couch. I walked to the front door on stiff legs, unlocked everything, and opened it. The air was painfully bright after being inside all night. The snow reflected the morning light up into my eyes, making them water. I blinked hard and looked down. The footprints were still there. They were even clearer in daylight. Deep, long wrong. They came out of the tree line, crossed the yard, climbed the 2 porch steps, and stopped at my door. No overlapping tracks. No return path. No smudged edges to suggest pacing. Just that single one-way trail. I walked the perimeter of the cabin slowly, my breath puffing in uneven clouds. There were faint marks on the wood where something had scraped along the walls. Long, shallow grooves, not deep enough to be from a tool, too controlled to be from an animal. They followed the exact route I'd heard during the night. I left that cabin 2 days later. I told the rental company it was the cold, that the heater was failing, that I'd found somewhere closer to town. I didn't tell them about the footprints. I didn't tell anyone, actually. How do you explain something you can't make fit into words that sound sane? The first year I tried to forget. I moved back closer to people, back into noise and traffic and streetlights. I told myself it was stress and isolation and my brain playing tricks on me. Then New Year's Eve came around. I wasn't even thinking about the cabin. I was at my new place, small duplex, shared driveway, neighbors arguing through the walls. The clock hit 12:30. Someone set off cheap fireworks down the block. And then I heard it. Crunch. Just one. Right outside my door. My stomach flipped. My legs carried me to the peephole before my brain caught up. I looked out and saw nothing but the dimly lit walkway and the parked cars. But something made me open the door. Just an inch. The air was cold. Not cabin cold, but enough to sting. I looked down. There, on the concrete just before the welcome mat, was a single wet shape. Not a full footprint. Just the suggestion of one, smeared by melting slush. Long wrong. Every New Year's Eve since, I've checked. Sometimes there are nothing but normal tracks from neighbors and delivery guys. Sometimes there's that one distorted impression, alone, too close to the door. And once, last year, I woke up at 12:31 to the sound of something rough brushing along my bedroom wall. Just once. Just a single, slow scrape that woke me like a hand on my shoulder. I know how this sounds. I know what people think when they hear stories like this. But I also know what I saw in that snow miles from anyone. I know what I heard circling that cabin until dawn. And I know this. Snow doesn't lie. Wood doesn't lie. The marks are still there inside me, even if no one else can see them. So if you ever find yourself alone on New Year's, out where the wind has room to move and the snow keeps its own records, do yourself a favor. Before you open the door, look down. If the prints only come toward you and never go back, close the door, lock it, and don't make the mistake I did. Don't stand there listening, pretending whatever's out there isn't already learning the shape of your house, your life by heart. I'm 34 now, and I still can't sit in a subway car without checking every face, one by one, waiting to see if any of them forget to blink. Most people don't think about blinking. It's automatic. It's human. You only notice it when something's wrong. I learned that on New Year's Eve 5 years ago. Back then I lived in the city. Cheap studio, thin walls, sirens at all hours. I worked IT for a logistics company, the kind of job where your eyes burn from staring at screens but your brain never feels like it did anything important. I wasn't special. Just another tired guy in a big, indifferent place. That New Year's, my friends had finally bullied me into going to a party downtown. "Stop being an old man," they'd said. "You're 29, not 50. Midnight shots, rooftop view, you're coming." I remember standing in my bathroom mirror before I left, telling myself I'd stay for an hour, 2 at most. I was already exhausted. Burnout wasn't even the right word anymore. It felt like my life was stuck on a loop. Work, commute, microwave dinner, scroll on my phone until I fell asleep. I told myself I needed to at least pretend I was still part of the world. That was my first mistake. The train station was already packed when I got there. It was one of those underground hubs where the air never feels fully fresh. The smell hit me first. Damp concrete, old metal, layers of sweat and cheap perfume battling it out under flickering fluorescent lights. I checked the time on my phone. 10:54 p.m. Enough time to get to the party, enough time to change my mind 100 times. When the train screamed into the station, everyone surged forward at once. Bodies pressing in, breaths mixing, coats brushing against my arms. I got pushed into the car more than I actually stepped into it. The doors slid shut with that pneumatic sigh, sealing us all into this long, rattling tube of recycled air. It was hot, too hot. The windows were fogged from everyone's breath. Music leaked from someone's headphones, a high, tinny beat. Someone laughed too loud near the far doors. Someone else coughed, wet and heavy. I grabbed a pole with my right hand and tried to breathe through my mouth. The overhead lights flickered once as the train lurched forward, like they were thinking about dying and decided against it. That's when I saw him. He was maybe 4 or 5 people down the car, standing in the middle of the crowd but somehow not part of it. Tall, thin in a way that didn't look healthy. His suit was dark and too formal for the train, like he'd stepped out of a funeral or a boardroom and onto the wrong line. But it wasn't his clothes that got me. It was his face. He was pale. Not just works indoors pale, but that odd, flat color of paper that sat in a drawer too long. His hair was combed neatly back. His mouth relaxed. No sneer, no smile. And his eyes were locked on me. White, dark, unmoving, like 2 polished stones sunk into his face. I glanced away after a second, because that's what you do when you accidentally make eye contact with a stranger in the city. You pretend you didn't. You focus on an advertisement, a floor tile, your own reflection in the window. I told myself it was nothing, just some guy, maybe drunk, maybe high. I was already anxious, that was all. I stared at the subway map above the door like I cared about it. My heart took a little longer than usual to settle, but it did. I forced myself to breathe slow, counting in my head. 1 station passed. The train jerked. The crowd shifted. Bodies swayed. When I looked up again, he was closer. Only 2 people between us now. Same expression. Same 2 wide eyes. Still fixed on me. He wasn't jostled by the crowd like everyone else. It was like the movement of the train didn't touch him. My hand tightened on the metal pole. The overhead light flickered again, briefly dimming his face, then bringing it back into harsh clarity. He hadn't blinked. You tell yourself you're imagining that. Of course he blinked. You just missed it. People blink all the time. You can't catch every single one. That's what I told myself. I shifted my weight and looked down at my shoes, feeling sweat collect at the back of my neck despite the cold outside. The next station came and went. The doors opened. A few people squeezed out. More flooded in. New coats, new perfumes, new elbows pressing into ribs. The car was an oven now, everyone's body heat trapped and recycled. When it moved again, the car jolted harder than usual. People stumbled, grabbed for balance. Someone bumped my shoulder. Someone else cursed. I made the mistake of looking up. He was right in front of me, inches. There was no one between us anymore. I hadn't seen him move. I swear to you, I watched the flow of bodies, the way people turned and shifted to make space, and it was like he just appeared there. His face was level with mine. His eyes were even wider now, taking up too much of his expression. No irritation, no curiosity, just attention. Like he was studying me the way you study something under glass. He still hadn't blinked. A sour wave rolled up from my stomach. Up close, he smelled wrong. not like sweat or alcohol. There was this faint trace of something chemical and sweet, like old flowers left in a sealed room too long. Underneath that, something else, damp fabric and, I don't know, I want to say earth but colder. My mouth went dry. Every instinct I had finally woke up at once and screamed at me, "Get off this train." That was my signal. That was the moment I should have pushed past him, muttered some apology, and gotten off at the very next stop. Even if it wasn't mine. Even if it threw off my whole night. But I froze. He didn't say anything. The train screeched through a tunnel, the sound filling every space, scraping along my nerves. The lights flickered again, longer this time, stuttering on, off, on, making everyone look like they were moving in jagged frames. In one of those flickers, his face changed. His mouth opened just a little. His lips moved, slow and deliberate. But the sound that reached my ears didn't match. "Don't celebrate," he whispered, except his voice didn't fit his body. It sounded far away, like it was coming from the far end of a long hallway or through an old speaker. There were layers to it, like there were 3 or 4 voices stacked on top of each other, all saying the same words at the same time, but a half second out of sync. I smelled something then, rot, faint but sharp, cutting through perfume and sweat and metal, like something had gone bad a long time ago and someone had tried to cover it with chemicals, but the decay was still winning. My vision blurred for a second. My hands tingled. I told myself I was having a panic attack. The lights flickered again. His lips were closed. His face was neutral. His eyes hadn't left mine. I need to get off here," I muttered, even though we weren't at a station. My voice sounded wrong, too thin. People were laughing somewhere behind us, yelling over a song on someone's speaker, counting down early for a new year that wasn't here yet. "Don't celebrate," he said again. This time I saw his mouth move, but it still didn't sync with the sound. The words hit my ears half a beat before his lips formed them. The voices stacked, echoing slightly, like a bad recording. I stumbled back, bumping into someone, earning a sharp "Watch it, man." The stranger's hand pressed into my back briefly, too warm and too human, and the contrast made my skin crawl. When the train finally pulled into the next station, the doors opened with that familiar chime. I didn't check the name, didn't care where we were. I shoved past anyone in front of me, ignoring protests and elbows, and forced myself onto the platform. I didn't look back initially. I just walked, fast. The air on the platform was cooler, but it still tasted like dust and oil. The crowd thinned as people split toward exits, escalators, connecting trains. Then I heard a soft tap against glass. I turned. The train doors were closing. People were still inside, some already pulling out their phones, some laughing, some swaying to music only they could hear. He was at the door, face pressed to the narrow window, eyes locked on me through layers of grime and reflection. They were even wider now, if that was possible, so wide the skin around them looked stretched, strained. He still didn't blink. The doors sealed with a hiss. The train started to move. He stayed there, rigid, eyes on mine, face sliding out of view as the car rolled past. The last thing I saw was the curve of his mouth twitching just slightly upward, like he was trying to remember how to smile. I stood there until the red tail lights disappeared into the tunnel. My friends texted, called, "Where are you? You better not bail." I stared at the screen, thumb hovering, then shoved the phone back into my pocket and found the nearest exit. I went home. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those unblinking eyes, that out-of-sync whisper. The sound of it seemed to hang in the apartment after I turned the lights off. "Don't celebrate," buzzing in the corners like a trapped insect. I told myself it was a weird guy. That's all. Big city, big odds of running into someone unwell. I almost believed it. Until 12:04 a.m. I know the exact time because I was staring at the digital clock on my microwave when it happened. I'd been pacing between the kitchen and the living area, lights on, TV off, apartment too quiet. At 12:03, the numbers blinked. At 12:04, my phone buzzed with a mass "Happy New Year" message from a family group chat, and someone knocked on my window. Not loudly, Just 3 slow, deliberate taps. I live on the 6th floor. The sound came from the big window above my radiator, the one that looks out over the alley and the brick wall of the building across from mine. The glass shuddered with each tap, a tiny vibration that traveled through the frame and into the floor. For a second, I couldn't move. Then I forced myself to turn. He was there, on the other side of the glass, pressed up so close his breath fogged a pale halo around his face. Same suit, same pale skin, same stretched, unblinking eyes. The city lights below threw weird shadows up his neck, making his jaw look longer, sharper. My stomach dropped out. My knees actually wobbled. It's one thing to see someone on a train platform where you can tell yourself there are explanations. Another to see them defying everything you understand about the world, standing outside a 6th-floor window with nothing to hold onto. His lips moved again. The glass muted the sound, but I heard it anyway. Not through my ears, through my bones. Don't celebrate. The words crawled up my spine, each syllable cold and heavy. My breath hitched. The air in the room felt suddenly thick, warm, and suffocating, like the heat had been turned up to unbearable in 1 second. I stumbled backward until my calves hit the edge of the couch and I fell onto it. My fingers dug into the fabric. Couldn't look away. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might black out. He didn't blink. Not once. I don't know how long he stood there. Felt like hours. It was probably less than a minute. At some point, the lights in my apartment flickered. Just once. When they steadied, the window was empty. The fog patch on the glass was already fading. I didn't call the police. What would I even say? A man who doesn't blink teleported to my window? They would have asked how much I'd had to drink. Told me it was a dream, stress, a reflection, anything but what I knew I'd seen. I didn't go to work the next day, or the day after. I avoided the subway for weeks, taking buses, walking until my feet blistered. Anything to stay out of those underground cars. Time passed, like it always does. I went back to pretending everything was fine. I told myself it was a hallucination, a mix of anxiety and exhaustion. Sometimes I almost managed to believe that. Then the next New Year's Eve came. I didn't go out. I didn't even think about it. I sat on my couch in sweatpants, TV volume low, phone face down. Midnight came and went. People yelled from balconies. Fireworks cracked outside. A car alarm went off somewhere and kept going. At 12:04 a.m., someone knocked on my window. 3 slow, deliberate taps. I didn't look right away. I sat there, every muscle locked, staring at the dark TV screen reflecting the faint glow of my lamp. My eyes burned. My throat felt thick. The knocking didn't come again. Just those 3 taps. When I finally stood and turned to look, the window was empty. But there was a small oval of fog on the glass, exactly where someone's mouth would be if they leaned close. It's been 5 years. Every New Year's since, at 12:04 a.m., I hear something on that window. Sometimes it's the 3 taps. Sometimes it's just the softest scrape, like nails dragging lightly across glass. Twice I've seen the fog. Once, 2 years ago, I thought I saw a shape across the alley. A tall, thin shadow standing in a dark window directly opposite mine, where I know for a fact no one lives. I don't celebrate New Year's anymore. My friends stopped asking. They just assume I'm antisocial, and it's easier to let them think that than explain any of this. I know how it sounds. I know you can pick it apart and tell yourself it was all in my head. Stress, anxiety, city life, a weird guy on a train, and a brain desperate to make patterns out of noise. But I also know this, people blink. They have to, and whatever that was, didn't. So if you ever find yourself in a crowded subway car on a holiday night, sweating under dead fluorescent lights, and you notice someone staring at you without blinking, really look. Watch their eyes. Watch their mouth. And if they ever lean in, and their voice sounds like it's coming from somewhere else entirely, do what I didn't. Get off. Get away. Because once they notice you, they don't seem to forget. I'm 33 now, married, living in a small house with a fenced backyard and neighbors on both sides. And I still won't go anywhere near the woods on a holiday. Not on New Year's. Not on the 4th of July. Not even when someone suggests a chill weekend camping trip. People think it's because I had some bad experience with fireworks. That's the easy version I let them believe. The real reason is harder to explain without sounding crazy. I grew up about 40 minutes from Pine Hollow. It's one of those forests locals know better than tourists do. No big signs, no souvenir shop, just a cracked parking lot. A bulletin board with faded warnings, and trails that cut into the trees like veins. My cousin Mark and I spent half our childhood there, skipping rocks in the creek, pretending to be explorers, scaring each other with ghost stories when the light started to fade. Pine Hollow felt like ours. That's why, when we were 24 and both stuck in dead-end jobs, we thought it would be symbolic to ring in the new year there, reset at the place we started. We said stupid things like that back then. I remember that day clearly. The sky was a flat, dull gray, like someone had erased the sun and forgotten to put it back. The air had that winter bite to it, cold enough to sting your nose, not cold enough for snow. The smell of pine and damp earth hit me the second we stepped out of the car. It always did. It smelled like childhood and rot at the same time. We hiked in with overstuffed backpacks, cheap tent, sleeping bags, instant noodles, a small camping stove, and a bottle of cheap whiskey Mark insisted on bringing. The trail was quiet. No other cars in the lot. No other voices in the trees. Just the soft crunch of old leaves under our boots and the distant creak of branches swaying. "This is perfect," Mark said for the 10th time, swinging his hands like a kid. "No crowds, no fake countdowns. Just us and the forest. Just us and hypothermia," I joked, pulling my jacket tighter. My breath came out in small white clouds. We set up camp in a little clearing we used as kids. It was barely more than a flat patch of dirt between 3 thick pines, but to us it felt like a secret room. Mark got the tent poles wrong twice, swearing under his breath while I laughed and tried to help. By the time the thing was finally standing, the light had started to leak out of the sky, turning everything a deeper shade of blue. We built a fire the normal way. Wood, kindling, matches. Took a while, the way it always does when your fingers are numb and the wind keeps snatching at the flame. But when it finally caught, that small orange glow in the center of all that dark felt comforting. Human. We sat on old logs, wrapped in jackets and blankets, letting the heat sting our faces while our backs stayed cold. The forest noises shifted as night settled in. Birds quieted. Something small skittered through the underbrush nearby. The trees creaked like they were stretching. We talked about nothing and everything. Jobs we hated, people we missed. How weird it was that we were old enough to remember the good old days already. I remember feeling tired, not just from the hike, tired of my own life, tired of going in circles. That's probably why I went along with what happened next. Around 11 p.m., we heard fireworks. Sharp pops in the distance, muffled by the trees but too clear to ignore. Not the big booming city kind. Smaller, meaner, like someone was lighting them just out of sight. Mark grinned. Sounds like town started early, but it didn't sound that far away. Felt like it was coming from inside the forest, not over it. There was something off about the rhythm too. Fireworks are usually messy, random, overlapping bursts. These came in precise little bursts. 3 pops, silence. 2 pops, silence. 3 pops again. I felt it then. A tiny knot of unease tightening in my stomach. "They're close," I said. "Too close, right?" Mark shrugged, already craning his neck, trying to see through the trees. "Maybe some other campers. We're not the only ones with good ideas, dude." Another set of pops. This time I could feel the vibrations in the log under me, like the sound was crawling through the ground. The fire flickered, throwing quick shadows over Mark's face. For a second, his eyes looked too deep, like hollows instead of pupils. "I don't like it," I said. "We can see them from here. If they're that close, they're being idiots. Forest is dry." He laughed. "Come on, man. Live a little. Let's just go look." 2 minutes. My instincts said no. Loudly, firmly. Everything in my chest tightened like someone had grabbed my heart with a cold hand. I should have listened. That was the first sign something was wrong. But it was late, and the forest felt familiar, and I was tired of being the careful one. "Fine," I said. 2 minutes. We stay on the trail. He was already grabbing a flashlight. We left our fire burning low and followed the direction of the pops. The further we walked, the sharper the sound got. No echo, no distance blur, just sudden, crisp explosions rippling through the air. The smell changed as we went, less pine, more chemical, like spent fireworks and something acrid underneath, stinging the back of my throat. Branches scratched at my jacket. The beam from our flashlight swung over trunks and brambles and patches of dead leaves. Every now and then, it caught 2 bright points, eyes of some animal blinking back at us before disappearing. "Almost there," Mark said, voice low but excited. "You see that? Up ahead, between the trees, the darkness wasn't complete anymore. There was a dull, steady glow. Not the pulsing flash of fireworks. Something more constant, seeping through the gaps like light under a door. My legs suddenly felt heavier. My palms were slick around the flashlight handle. Every step forward felt like a decision I could still undo. "We should go back," I said. "Seriously, I've got a bad feeling, Mark." He glanced back at me and rolled his eyes. "You always have a bad feeling. If it's just some kids, we tell them to knock it off before they burn the place down, and we're heroes. If it's nothing, we'll laugh. Relax." I told myself he was right. I told myself I was being dramatic. We kept going. The trees thinned, and the glow sharpened. It wasn't orange like a normal fire. It was more colorless. White-yellow, but too clean. Wrong. When we stepped into the clearing, every hair on my body stood up at once. The fire wasn't a campfire. It was a circle. Flames formed a perfect ring on the ground, maybe 10 or 12 feet across. No logs, no branches, no visible fuel at all. Just fire, burning in a single unbroken line on bare earth. The light it gave off was bright but strangely flat, like it didn't want to leave the circle. Inside that ring stood 5 figures. They were human-shaped, tall, thin, dressed in something dark that didn't catch the light. Hoods or long hair, I couldn't tell. They were spaced evenly around the inside of the circle, all facing inward, except their heads. Their bodies were angled toward the center, but their heads were turned toward us. Every single one, like they'd been watching us walk in from the moment we left our own campsite. My breath caught halfway up my throat and stayed there. The flashlight in my hand shook. The beam jittered over their shoulders and the strange flames. None of them moved, not even to flinch at the light. "Hello," Mark called, because of course he did. His voice sounded too loud, bouncing off the trees and dying in the dark beyond. "Hey, this is a no-fire zone, you can't." The closest figure's head turned a little further. Slowly, too slowly, like its neck was stiff or like something was turning it from the inside. I heard a sound with it. Not bone cracking, not quite, but a wet, grinding shuffle that made my stomach twist. The ring of fire didn't flicker. It didn't snap or pop. It just burned, steady and silent. "Dude," I whispered. "Mark, we need to go." He must have heard the way my voice broke, because he finally shut up. I saw his shoulders stiffen. The nearest figure took a step forward. Only, it didn't move its legs right. The foot came down too long, too smooth, like it was sliding into place instead of stepping. The flames didn't touch it. The fire bent around its ankle, like it was making room. My heart started pounding so hard my vision pulsed with it. I could hear my own blood, a dull rushing sound in my ears. The figure's head tilted just a few degrees, like it was curious. The air shifted. The temperature dropped so fast I actually saw my breath plume out, even though the clearing was full of fire. The smell changed too. Under the chemical tang was something older, damp earth and mildew and the faint copper of blood. "Go," I said. "Now." I took a step backward. Mark didn't move. Another step. The figure inside the ring took another too smooth step toward the edge of the circle. The flames went out. Not one by one. Not dimming. Just gone. In an instant. 1 second there was that unnatural ring of light and those 5 silhouettes. The next, There was nothing but pure, heavy darkness. The kind of darkness that isn't just an absence of light. The kind that feels like it has weight, texture, temperature. The flashlight in my hand flickered and died. For a second, there was no sound. No wind, no branches, no distant highway hum. Just this thick, suffocating silence pressing against my eardrums. Then the forest exhaled. I heard movement, not the random rustle of animals, not the familiar sway of trees. This was organized, coordinated, soft, quick steps all at once, like something had been waiting for the cue. Close, too close. Something brushed past my shoulder. Not a hand exactly, not cloth either. Felt cold and dry, like old paper dragged across my jacket. The contact was so light it barely registered, but my whole body recoiled. "Mark!" I shouted, my voice cracking. "I'm here," he said, somewhere to my left. His voice sounded small, thin, but it was there. Far off, deeper in the trees, I heard a sound like a single firework pop. Just one. Sharp. Perfect. That broke whatever paralysis I was in. "Run," I said. I didn't wait for him to agree. I turned and bolted blindly into the dark, branches whipping at my face, roots grabbing at my boots. I couldn't see the trail. I couldn't see anything. I ran toward where I hoped the path was, relying only on memory and terror. Behind us, I heard movement, multiple sets of footsteps, but not like normal running. There was no labored breathing, no chaotic crashing through the brush, just the steady, soft pursuit, like something gliding just above the ground, occasionally touching down. Another distant pop, then another. The sound echoed weirdly, folding back on itself, so I couldn't tell if it was behind us or ahead. I don't remember everything from that run, just fragments. The burn in my lungs, the cold air tearing at my throat, the taste of blood in my mouth where I'd bitten my tongue, the feeling that if I looked over my shoulder even once, I wouldn't get a second chance. At one point, Mark's hand grabbed the back of my jacket and yanked me sideways, just as my foot came down on what would have been open air, a drop where the trail had washed out. We slid together, hit the ground hard, scrambled up without speaking. We didn't stop until the trees started to thin, and we saw the faint, artificial glow of the trailhead lights ahead. The forest behind us felt thick and watchful, pressing up against the edge of the clearing like it wanted to follow but couldn't. We burst into the parking lot, both of us shaking, both of us gasping like we'd been underwater. Our car was the only one there, sitting under a yellow sodium lamp that buzzed like an angry insect. I looked back exactly once. The forest sat there, black and silent. No light, no figures, no fire. But I heard it. One last sharp pop, muffled by distance. We didn't say anything on the drive home. Not a word. The heater was blasting, but I couldn't stop shivering. My hands left little sweat prints on the steering wheel. We never went back to Pine Hollow together. We never talked in detail about what we'd seen that night. Anytime one of us started to bring it up, the other would shut it down with a joke, or a change of subject, or that tight-lipped silence people use when they're holding something in too hard. Mark moved out of state the next year. New job, new city. He texted me on New Year's sometimes, until he didn't. 2 years ago, on December 31st, I got a call from an unknown number just after midnight. I let it go to voicemail. In the morning, I listened. It was 3 seconds of audio, a sharp popping sound, like a small firework. Then this faint crackle, and something that might have been wind through trees. No voice, no words. The timestamp was exactly 12:01 a.m. I tried calling back. The number didn't exist. Now I live in a boring neighborhood with streetlights and noisy dogs, and kids who leave bicycles on the sidewalk. There's a little patch of woods behind my house. Nothing like Pine Hollow, just a corridor of trees between subdivisions. Most of the year, it's just background. Birds in the morning, crickets in the summer. But on New Year's Eve, just before midnight, if I stand in my kitchen with the lights off and the window cracked, I hear it. 3 pops. Silence. 2 pops. Silence. The sound isn't coming from town. It's coming from the black strip of trees behind my fence. Sometimes, if I listen long enough, I swear I can smell it too. That strange mix of chemicals and damp earth, threaded with something metallic. Everyone else hears fireworks. I hear an invitation. So if some year you decide to be different like we did, to skip the city noise and ring in the new year somewhere quiet, somewhere dark, pay attention. If the fireworks sound too close, too sharp, too organized, don't follow them. If you see fire where it shouldn't be, burning in shapes instead of piles, don't step into the clearing. Because some celebrations aren't for us. Sometimes we're the ones being counted down. I'm 31 now, living alone in a one-bedroom apartment over a closed-down bakery. And there are nights when I can't look at a digital clock changing from 11:59 to 12 o'clock without my chest tightening. Midnight used to be fun for me. It meant something. Late movies, stupid dares, New Year's Eve countdowns with cheap champagne and people yelling off-key. I used to be the one shouting the loudest. I liked being the one who started the countdown. I don't start them anymore. The night I'm about to tell you about was 3 years ago. I was 28, still in that phase where every bad feeling could be drowned out with noise and other people's laughter. My friend group was small but tight. Me, my best friend Jared, his girlfriend Mia, and a rotating cast of coworkers and plus ones. That New Year's Eve, we were at Mia's cousin's house. Not some fancy mansion. Just an old 2-story place at the edge of town that her aunt was trying to sell. That's how she pitched it. Empty house, no neighbors close enough to call the cops, Mia said, wiggling her eyebrows. We can be as loud as we want. I remember the house as soon as we walked in. How it smelled. Old wood, stale air. Just the faintest hint of mildew climbing up from the basement. The kind of place that had been warm once when someone still lived there, but now felt like it had cooled all the way down and stayed that way. The floors creaked with every step, and the banister on the stairs was cold metal that clung to your skin for a beat too long. But the living room wasn't bad. Someone had dragged in a big Bluetooth speaker, colored string lights, and a fold-out table covered in plastic cups. Music was loud, people were already tipsy, and for a while it felt like any other house party. We kept it mostly on the first floor. Kitchen, living room, one bathroom under the stairs. The upstairs hallway was dark. The light bulb had blown, and whoever tried to change it gave up when they realized they didn't have a spare. That's what I was told. Anyway, every time I went past the bottom of the stairs, I felt it. That black slice of hallway, like a mouth hanging open at the top. The air that spilled down from it was always a couple of degrees colder than the rest of the house. I noticed it. I remember noticing it. I told myself it was just bad insulation. Old houses breathe weird. That's what my dad always said. Around 11:30 p.m., the party hit that sweet spot. Everyone loosened up, nobody gone yet. Jared was 3 drinks in, red-cheeked and loud. Mia had found a cheap glitter hat from somewhere and shoved it on my head, and I was buzzing with that warm, hazy feeling where everything feels slightly unreal. Someone turned the music down a bit. People started pulling out their phones, checking the time, getting ready. Half an hour, Mia shouted, holding up a bottle. We are not missing the countdown this year. I swear to God. We'd missed it the year before. Too drunk, too distracted, too busy yelling over each other. This time, everyone was weirdly determined to get it right. I drifted toward the kitchen to refill my cup. The house was quieter there, the music more muffled. The window over the sink was a black mirror. My own face looked back at me, flickering in time with the string lights in the next room. That's when I heard it. 10. A voice, deep, calm, coming from somewhere behind me. I thought someone had turned on the TV, or started an early countdown as a joke. I half smiled, turned back toward the living room, and froze. No one was counting. The music was still going. People were talking, laughing, shouting over each other. No one's mouth matched what I'd heard. 9. Clearer this time. Slow. Precise. Each number dropped into the air like a stone into water. The hair on my arms stood up. The sound wasn't coming from the speaker. It wasn't coming from the room at all. It was coming from the hallway upstairs. That dark strip above the stairs felt like it leaned forward. The air shifted, pushing out cold, sharp and clean, like the shock you get opening a freezer in summer. It slid down the staircase and spilled into the living room, brushing against my sweaty skin. I stepped closer to the bottom of the stairs without really deciding to. Jared caught my expression from across the room and frowned, starting to make his way over. 8. This time we all heard it. The chatter died mid-sentence. The song on the speaker kept playing, but softer now that no one was talking. Heads turned toward the stairs one by one, like something was pulling their attention there. "Who's doing that?" someone asked, a nervous laugh already primed in their throat. 7. The voice was wrong. It wasn't like a person shouting from upstairs. There was no echo, no distance. It felt like the sound was standing just out of sight, right at the edge of the dark. Calm, deep, completely unhurried. Not trying to be spooky, not amused, just counting. "Is someone upstairs?" Mia whispered, moving closer to Jared, her hand finding his wrist. "I thought this place was empty," I said, but my voice came out thinner than I meant it to. 6. The word slid down the stairs with the cold air. I swear I could feel it, like a vibration moving through the old wood, into the soles of my shoes, up into my bones. Someone finally reached for the light switch at the bottom of the stairs, flipping it up and down. Nothing. The hallway stayed black. "It's probably some Bluetooth thing," Jared said, too loud, like a stupid app. "One of you messing with us." No one answered. 5. The music cut out, not faded, not paused, just dropped into dead silence right as the number landed. The room suddenly felt smaller. I could hear people breathing. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. The cold coming from upstairs was stronger now. It smelled faintly off. Under the usual old wood and dust was this sharp, metallic tang, like cold metal and the ghost of something burned a long time ago. I should have listened to that feeling. The one that said, "Leave. Now, walk out the front door and don't look back." Instead, I stayed rooted there, fingers gripping the banister. I told myself I was fine. I wasn't. 4. The voice hadn't gotten louder, but it felt closer, like each number shaved off a little more distance between whatever was saying it and us. I realized I was counting the spaces between the numbers in my head. They were even, measured, like a metronome. "Maybe we should go," someone whispered behind me. No one moved. 3. The lights went out, all at once. No warning flicker, no dimming. Just absolute black, like the house had been dropped into a well. Someone screamed. Someone else swore. I heard the scrape of plastic cups hitting the floor, the thud of a body bumping into furniture. The darkness wasn't just the absence of light. It had weight. The air felt heavier, thick and warm against my face. But the current coming down the stairs was still icy, cutting through the rest of it, wrapping around my ankles. Something brushed past my leg. Not by accident. Not like someone stumbling in the dark. It slid along the side of my calf, slow and deliberate. It felt thin and wrong, like fingers with no warmth, no muscle, just skin stretched over something too hard. I flinched so hard my knee buckled. My hand left the banister for a second and grabbed empty air. My heart hammered against my ribs so violently it hurt. 2. The word came from right above me. Not upstairs. Not across the room. Directly over my head, as if someone was standing on the step above me, leaning right down into the dark. I could feel breath on the side of my face. Cold. It smelled like damp stone and something old and stale, like a basement that had never been opened. No one spoke now. No one screamed. The silence in that second felt aware, like the house was listening to us, not the other way around. 1. Just that. One soft word. Then nothing. No crash. No laughter. No gotcha. Just a silence so dense it made my ears ring. The lights came back on a heartbeat later. They flickered, humming angrily as they warmed, and the house snapped back into reality. String lights glowed weakly. The overhead bulb buzzed. Someone's phone started blaring a New Year's notification in the background. I was still gripping the banister. My hand hurt. I looked down and realized my knuckles were white. People were looking around in that dazed, shocked way, checking themselves, checking each other, half smiling like they weren't sure whether to laugh. And then someone said, "Where's Lily?" We all turned around like we'd practiced it. She'd been near the back wall, I remembered that much. Red sweater, black jeans. She'd spilled her drink earlier and made a big deal about it, laughing at herself. I could picture exactly where she'd been standing when the lights went off. That spot was empty. "Lily," Mia called, moving through the cluster of people. "Quit messing around." Nothing. People checked the kitchen, the bathroom, under the stairs, the little side porch, the car out front, upstairs even, finally. Every room creaked and complained, but there was nothing. No wet footprints, no open window, no sound of someone snickering behind a door, waiting to jump out and scare us. Her coat was still on the hook by the door. Her bag was still by the couch. Her phone was on the table, screen lit up with a missed call from her mom. We called her name until our voices broke. We called her phone even though we could see it. We called 911 when reality finally caught up to us and no one could spin it into a prank anymore. The police came. They walked through the house with their heavy boots and their clipped voices and their flashlights. They asked questions that didn't fit what had happened. Any exes we should know about? Did she seem upset? Did anyone see her leave? We tried to explain about the voice, the countdown, the dark hallway. You could see it in their faces, the way belief shut off behind their eyes like someone flipping a switch. No forced entry, no signs of a struggle, no footprints but ours in the leaf-strewn front yard. Nothing on the cameras from nearby. Lily was just gone. We gave statements. We went home. We waited for updates. None came. I think that's the part that really sank its teeth into me. How someone could be there 1 second, breathing, laughing, rolling their eyes at a bad joke, and gone the next between numbers. For weeks after, every tick of a clock sounded too loud. Every time I heard someone start a casual 3, 2, 1, my whole body tensed, waiting for the lights to go out, for that breath on my face again. Life went on. It always does. People got quieter when they said her name. Then they stopped saying it. The case went cold. The house got sold, I heard. Someone else lives there now. Sometimes I think about knocking on their door, warning them about that upstairs hallway. I never do, because I don't know how to explain something I don't understand without dragging them into it too. The first time my phone buzzed in the middle of the night, about 6 months later, I thought it was just another insomnia scroll. I was half asleep, room dark, digits on the bedside clock glowing 12 o'clock. Notification. New voice message. Unknown number. I shouldn't have pressed play. Static at first. Then under it a man whispering. 1098. No greeting. No context. No breathing. Just numbers. Calm. Slow. I listened until 6 before I hung up, hands shaking. I blocked the number. A month later, another unknown caller. Another voice message. The same numbers, starting from 10. It doesn't happen every night. Not even every month. There's no pattern I can chart, nothing logical I can cling to. But every so often, usually when I've almost convinced myself it's all in my head, my phone buzzes just after midnight, and I see that little voicemail icon. When I'm stupid enough to listen, it's always the same. 1098. Sometimes it goes all the way to 1. Sometimes it cuts off somewhere in the middle, like whoever's speaking got bored. We're close enough. I don't celebrate New Year's anymore. I don't go to house parties. And if someone even jokes about starting a countdown early, I find an excuse to leave. People think I'm dramatic, sensitive. I let them. You can call it trauma. You can call it guilt. I call it a reminder, because here's what I can't shake. The way the air felt right before 1. The way the silence seemed to lean in. The way a person, someone I knew, someone who trusted me enough to come to that house, can just vanish on the count of a stranger's voice. If you ever hear someone start counting down from somewhere they shouldn't be, an empty room, a dark hallway, your phone at midnight, don't wait to see what happens at 1. Some countdowns aren't meant for celebration. They're meant to see who's paying attention. I'm 30 now, and I live in a different city, on a different street, in a different building, but I still avoid looking out my window at night. especially on New Year's Eve. Back when this happened, I was 26 and living in a one-bedroom apartment on a dead-end street on the edge of town. It was one of those places with thin walls, buzzing radiators, and a landlord who only answered texts if the word rent was in them. I worked late shifts at a call center, slept badly, and told myself this was temporary. 6 months, maybe a year, and I'd move somewhere nicer. Across the street from my building was that house. You know the type before I even describe it. Every neighborhood has one. Old, sagging, wrong somehow. The grass in the tiny front yard had given up years ago. It was just dirt and patches of frost, depending on the season. The windows were boarded from the inside, not outside. I noticed that the first week I moved in. The wood pressed tight against the glass, like someone didn't want anything looking out. Nobody parked in front of it. Kids crossed to the other side of the road when they walked past. Even stray cats seemed to avoid the yard. The first time I asked my downstairs neighbor about it, he just shrugged and said, "Been empty as long as I've been here," and he'd lived in our building 5 years. Supposedly the last owner died alone in there, and the bank had been trying to sell it ever since. People went in for viewings and didn't make offers. That was the story, anyway. From my living room window, I had a perfect view of its front. The door, the dead yard, the dark rectangles where windows should have been. At first it creeped me out. I kept my curtains half closed. After a while, it faded into background, just another ugly thing in a life full of them. I remember the new year when this happened because it was the first one after my breakup. All my friends had plans, couple stuff, bar stuff, big groups I didn't fit into anymore. I lied and told them I had a work shift. I didn't. I bought a cheap bottle of sparkling wine, a frozen pizza, and told myself I didn't care. If I had known what was coming, I wouldn't have gone home at all. That night, the air was knife cold. My breath hung in the air as I walked from the bus stop, tiny crystals catching the orange glow of the streetlights. People were already setting off early fireworks somewhere downtown, distant little pops and flashes reflecting off low clouds. When I turned onto my street, everything felt too quiet. No cars, no music bleeding from windows, just the soft crunch of frost under my boots and the faint hum of the traffic far away. And the house. For the first time since I'd moved in, it wasn't entirely dark. There was a soft yellow glow in one of the upstairs windows. Not bright, not electric, just this low, steady light, like a candle burning behind the boards. I stopped halfway across the street and just stared. Part of me thought, finally, someone bought it, someone moved in. My brain grabbed that explanation and clung to it, because anything was better than the alternative. But the boards were still there. I could see the edges clearly, the warped wood pressed tight against the glass. The light wasn't coming from a lamp in a furnished room. It was bleeding around the edges, like whatever was glowing was pressed right up against the window itself. The color of it bothered me. It wasn't the warm yellow of a normal candle. It was too pale, sickly, flickering so slowly it barely seemed to move, just dimming and brightening like something breathing. I told myself I was tired. I told myself I was projecting. I told myself a lot of things. And then I saw the silhouette. It was in the same window as the light. At first it was just a darker shape in the dim glow, but as I stared, it became a person. Shoulders, head, standing perfectly still behind the boards, facing my building, facing my window. The cold on my face suddenly felt sharper. I realized my eyes were watering, not from the wind this time. I waited for the shape to move, to step away, to do something human. Didn't. I stayed there too long. Long enough for my fingers to start going numb around the plastic bag with my sad New Year's supplies. Long enough to feel that little old, familiar tightening in my chest. The one that always shows up when my instincts know something is wrong before my brain catches up. I should have turned around, taken a walk, gone anywhere else. Instead, I looked down, swallowed hard, and went inside. Up 2 flights of stairs, keys fumbling in my hand, old carpet smelling like dust and stale smoke. My apartment felt smaller than usual when I stepped in. The heater rattled in the corner, kicking out that dry, overheated air that makes your skin feel tight. I tossed my jacket on the chair, set the bottle on the counter, and did what I always do when I don't want to think. I turned on the TV and pretended the noise made me less alone. But the window was still there, just to the left of the screen, showing me that house every time I glanced up. I poured a drink, then another. I tried watching some New Year's special where strangers in bright clothes yelled over live music, but the sound didn't reach me. I kept seeing that pale glow. At some point, a few minutes before midnight, the fireworks started in earnest. Loud bangs, whistles, bursts of color reflecting on my ceiling. People shouted on the street around the corner where the bars were. Curiosity, or something darker, pulled me back to the glass. I told myself I just wanted to see if maybe it really was new neighbors, if the light was just my imagination, if the silhouette was a trick. The house was still lit. The same upstairs window glowed with that weak yellow light. The same silhouette stood there, only it looked closer now, like it had moved right up against the glass, pressed just behind the boards. I couldn't see details. No face, no clothes, just the suggestion of someone watching. A firework went off close by, one of those white ones that flash like a camera. For a split second, the whole street lit up. In that momentary flare, the figure was gone from that window. When the darkness settled back in, the light in the first window had dimmed. A second window further along the house now glowed. Closer to my side, another silhouette stood there. I felt my throat close up. My heart started punching at my ribcage, too fast. I told myself it was coincidence. My brain scrambled for angles, reflections, anything. Another flash from the sky. Another boom. Another split second of harsh white light. Now the second window was empty. The third window, the one directly across from my apartment, had that pale glow. The silhouette stood inches from where I stood, separated only by glass and empty space and frost-covered air. It was facing me. There was no doubt now. It wasn't just looking at my building. It was looking at me. The next firework sounded farther away, but I didn't wait to see what it would reveal. My body moved before my mind made the choice. I yanked the curtains shut so hard the rod rattled. My hands were shaking. My breath came out in these short little gasps that didn't feel like enough. Out of sight, I told myself. Out of sight, out of mind. That was a lie. The kind you tell yourself when the truth is too big to look at. I went to bed with the TV still on in the other room, blue light leaking under my door. I lay on my back, eyes wide open, listening to the muffled celebrations outside turn into stray shouts, then into nothing. I must have dozed at some point, because the first tap nearly sent my heart right out of my chest. Soft, right on the glass. Tap, tap, tap. I froze, every muscle locking. The sound had come from the living room window, the second floor window. No balcony, no fire escape, just brick and glass and that empty house across the street. Tap, tap. The rhythm was controlled, not frantic like someone begging to be let in, more like signaling. Knuckles, or something like knuckles, hitting the window in a patient pattern. Go look, part of me whispered. You'll see there's nothing there. You're scaring yourself. The rest of me stayed plastered to the thin mattress, staring at the hairline crack in my bedroom ceiling like it was the most important thing in the world. The tapping stopped after a while. I don't know how long. Time gets weird when you're that afraid. The silence after it left felt thick, like the air had to fill back in around something that had been leaning too close. I didn't sleep again. The next morning, the world looked offensively normal. Pale winter sun, a few cars dusted with frost, someone walking their dog in a puffy jacket. My head throbbed from lack of sleep. My eyes felt gritty. I forced myself to the window. The house across the street was dark. No pale yellow glow. No silhouette. The boards were just boards again, warped, nailed tight from the inside. The yard was stamped with frost, undisturbed. No footprints. No cigarette butts. No signs of human life. I went to work. I didn't tell anyone. How do you even start that conversation? Hey, so I think the abandoned house across from me played musical windows with a shadow person last night? Days passed. Then weeks. I started sleeping again. The fear got folded up and tucked away with all the other things I don't like to think about. I almost convinced myself it was stress. Alcohol. reflections. I blocked it out so well that by the time December rolled around the next year, I barely flinched when someone mentioned New Year's plans. I didn't make any. I stayed home again. Different bottle. Same couch. Same window. The house was still empty. Still dark. At 11:58 p.m., my phone buzzed with a group chat full of confetti emojis. I smiled at it without really feeling anything and set it face down. That's when I heard it. Tap. Soft. Precise. Right behind me. My body knew before my brain did. This wasn't a random building sound. It wasn't the heater. It wasn't the neighbors. It was the same rhythm burned into my nerves from a year before. Tap, tap, tap. My hands went cold. I hadn't opened the curtains. They were closed. Thick, safe. I'd made sure of it hours earlier. The sound came again. Exactly the same spacing between each contact. Patient, unbothered. It followed me when I moved. That's the part one haven't said yet. Because I don't live on that street anymore. I moved out 6 months after that second New Year. Different neighborhood. Different building. My new place faces an alley, not a house. There's nothing across from me but brick and a flickering street lamp. And still, every New Year's Eve, somewhere between 11:58 and 12:10, I hear it. Tap, tap, tap. Always on the window closest to where I'm sitting. Even if I'm visiting family. Even if I'm in a high-rise 20 stories up. The glass shivers just slightly with each tiny impact. I've opened the curtains once. Just once. Last year, I told myself I was done being scared of nothing. Midnight came and went. Texts flew in. Fireworks exploded outside. Then, right on cue, tap. My heart hammered so hard I felt dizzy. My hand moved anyway, fingers slipping under the curtain edge and pulling it aside. There was no house across the street this time. Just the alley, the brick wall, the flickering orange cone of the streetlight. But in the window directly across from mine, in the building that should have been too far and too dark to see clearly, I swear I saw it. A shape, still, just beyond the glass. No features, no face, just a human outline that felt familiar. Watching, I dropped the curtain. I haven't looked out after dark since. You can tell yourself this is just anxiety. That I'm connecting coincidences. That I was lonely and half-drunk and turned an empty house into a monster because it was easier than turning the mirror on myself. You might be right, but if you ever move into a place with a clear view of an abandoned building, or a dark alley, or just a neighbor's unlit window across the way, do me a favor. On New Year's Eve, when the fireworks start and everyone's yelling and kissing and making promises they won't keep, don't look out your window just because you feel something on the other side of the glass. Because some attention, once you notice it, doesn't go away. Sometimes it just follows you. Street to street, city to city, tap, 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 waiting for you to look back. I'm 29, and I haven't made a New Year's resolution in 3 years. People laugh when I say that. They think I'm being dramatic or superstitious, like I had one bad year and decided to blame the calendar. It's easier to let them think that than explain the real reason. The real reason is my older brother, Daniel. We grew up in a small, tired house on the edge of a small, tired town. Squeaky floors, damp corners, peeling paint. The kind of place where the walls hold cold in winter and arguments in summer. Our parents divorced when I was 15, and after that it was just me, Daniel, and our mother slowly dissolving into work and sleep. Daniel was always the one who was supposed to make it. Smart, good at school, always talking about getting out. Somewhere between graduating and turning 28, that plan broke. The jobs never lined up, the relationships didn't last, the debts piled up. By the time that New Year's Eve rolled around, he was living back at home in his childhood room, surrounded by boxes of his old life and the quiet weight of his failed plans. He started saying things like, New Year's isn't just a date, you know? There's a reset point, a window when things can be pushed. At first it sounded like self-help nonsense. I'd find him hunched over the kitchen table with library books, ancient-looking ones with cracked spines, and cheap paperbacks with titles about liminal hours and ritual focus and thresholds. I'd roll my eyes, grab my coffee, and joke, "What, you gonna manifest better credit with a candle?" He'd just smile, this tight, humorless thing. It's about timing, he'd say. About intention. Everyone makes a wish at midnight and then forgets it. They're doing it wrong. If I had known what was coming, I would have burned those books in the sink. The whole week leading up to December 31st, he got worse. Restless, jittery. His eyes were ringed with shadows, like he wasn't sleeping. I'd hear him pacing in his room after midnight, floorboards creaking in slow, tight patterns. Sometimes he'd stop for long stretches, and the silence would feel heavier than the noise. He stopped coming out to eat with us. He'd wait until Mom and I had gone to bed, then microwave something and take it back to his room. His door was always shut, a thin strip of yellow light underneath it and a smell drifting out. Wax, something herbal and burned, like dried leaves left on a stove too long. The first real red flag, one I can still see if I close my eyes, was on December 30th. I walked past his door and heard whispering, not like him talking on the phone. This was softer, lower. The tone you use when you're repeating something from a page. Dan? I knocked. My knuckles hit old wood, and I felt the hollow vibration in my fingertips. The whispering stopped instantly. Not even a rustle of movement. You okay? I tried to laugh to keep my voice light. You summoning your future wife in there or what? After a beat, he said, Yeah, just reading. Don't come in. His voice sounded wrong. Tight, breathy. There was a delay, like he'd had to pull himself up from somewhere far away. I should have pushed the door open then. That was the first sign something was really, truly wrong. Instead, I shrugged it off. Everyone handles failure differently, right? Some people drink, some people run marathons, some people bury themselves in weird hobbies. I told myself he was just coping. New Year's Eve was cold that year. The house had that particular winter smell. Old wood, dust, sour laundry hanging too long in the hallway. Mom worked a double shift at the hospital and left around 4, promising to try and be home before midnight. I didn't believe her. By 9, the neighborhood was already popping small fireworks, faint cracks and whistles echoing through the thin walls. I sat on the couch with a blanket watching some cheap TV countdown special. The living room lamp flickered occasionally, not quite dying, just reminding me the house was older than my memories. Around 10:30, Daniel came out of his room. He looked different, not like he'd slept. His hair was flattened on one side, eyes red-veined and bright. There was a faint, stale smell clinging to him. Melted candle wax, something bitter underneath. Maybe sage, maybe something else. I need the house quiet tonight, he said. Okay, I replied. Like, how quiet? I mean, completely. No TV after 11. No music. Don't knock on my door. Don't call me. Just let the hour pass. He said, the hour, like it meant something more than 60 minutes. I tried to joke again because that's what I do when I'm scared. You planning on ascending or something? He didn't smile. He just looked at me for a long second, and in that look I saw something I still don't know how to name. Hope, maybe. Desperation. Fear. If I can fix it, he said quietly, everything changes. You'll see. Then he went back into his room and closed the door. I heard the snick of the lock sliding into place. The house felt wrong after that. Too still. The kind of silence that makes every other sound stand out. The radiator popping, the fridge humming, cars hissing on wet asphalt outside. At 11 o'clock, I turned off the TV like he'd asked. The sudden dark rectangle of the blank screen made my reflection jump out at me. Pale, small, nervous. I left the lamp on and sat there on the couch, listening. From upstairs, the faintest sound drifted down. Something scratching. A pen? Chalk? Movement in circles. Occasionally a soft murmur I couldn't make out. A heavy, sinking feeling settled in my gut. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that he was just doing some overcomplicated manifestation ritual he'd forget about in a month. At 11:50, guilt finally pushed me to move. I made him a plate, some leftover pasta, a piece of bread, whatever we had. Felt stupid, but it gave me an excuse. I carried it up the stairs, each step creaking under my slippers. The upstairs hallway was colder than the living room, the air thin and static. I stopped in front of his door. Up close, the smell was stronger. Melted wax, burned herbs, something metallic underneath it that made the back of my throat prickle. I knocked lightly with my knuckles. "Hey, brought you food. You should eat before you fix the universe or whatever." No answer. "Dan?" I tried again, louder. "Come on. 10 minutes won't ruin your ritual." The silence on the other side felt thick. Not empty, loaded. It made the tiny hairs on my arms lift. I thought about trying the handle. I put the plate down on the floor and wrapped my fingers around the doorknob. Locked. Something about that made my chest tighten. He never locked his door growing up. Not once, even during the worst of arguments. I pressed my ear to the wood. It was cold. I could hear something inside. A low, rhythmic sound. Not words yet. Just breath and syllables smudged together. Like he was practicing under his breath. I should have called Mom. I should have called someone. I didn't. Instead I whispered, "Okay, just don't do anything stupid," and went back downstairs, leaving the uneaten food outside his room like I was feeding a ghost. At 11:59, the whole house changed. It's strange to say that about a specific minute, but I remember watching the digital clock on the microwave tick from 11:58 to 59, the red numbers bleeding on the plastic. The second that last minute started, his voice rose. It wasn't muttering anymore. It was chanting. Low, fast, desperate. The words were wrong. They didn't sound like any language I knew. Each one had too many consonants, or too many vowels dragged out until they seemed to fray at the edges. The sound wormed its way through the floorboards, vibrating in the air, in my teeth. I shot off the couch. The house suddenly felt too small, the ceilings too low, the air thick and hot despite the winter outside. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it was trying to escape my chest. "Daniel!" I shouted up the stairs. "Stop it. This isn't funny." If he heard me, he didn't show it. The chanting got faster, louder. His voice cracked on some of the syllables, but he forced them out anyway, like he was racing something to the end. Out on the street, fireworks started early. Dull booms and sharp cracks layered over his words. The house shook slightly with each explosion, dust drifting from the old crown molding. The oven clock said 11:59. He was still chanting when it hit 00. People outside started counting down somewhere in the distance. I could hear muffled voices through the glass. 10, 9, 8. Inside the house, his voice peaked. The words twisted, pulling tight into something that made my skin crawl. I couldn't understand them, but my body did. Every nerve screamed, "This is wrong." 3, 2, he screamed when midnight hit. I have heard people scream in pain. I have heard audio of accident calls and horror movies and everything in between. Nothing sounded like that. It wasn't just loud. It was breaking, like the sound itself was tearing something open. It rose from his room and flooded the house. A raw, jagged shriek that cut straight through the floor, through my bones, straight into whatever part of the brain remembers fear from before you have words for it. I don't remember running up the stairs. I remember tripping once, skinning my shin, hardly feeling it. I remember slamming into the door with my shoulder because the knob wouldn't turn. A shock of pain shooting down my arm. The wood didn't give. "Daniel!" I shouted, voice shaking. "Open the door." No answer now. No chanting. No screaming. Just a ringing silence. Something in me snapped. I took 2 steps back, sucked in a breath, and threw my whole weight into the door shoulder first. Cracked. The frame splintered. The second hit blew it open. His room smelled wrong. The wax and herb smell was overpowering now, mixed with sweat and something like iron. The air was hot and still, heavy in my lungs. I tasted dust, bitter and thick on my tongue. He was standing in the middle of the room. He'd drawn a circle on the floor. Not just a rough chalk outline, this was precise, obsessive. Layers of symbols spiraled inwards on the worn hardwood, some drawn in chalk, some in something darker that had dried to a brown-red crust. Candles sat at points along the circle, their wax pooled and hardened in pale lumps. He was inside it, barefoot, shirtless. His chest was heaving. His skin gleamed with sweat, every muscle in his shoulders drawn tight like he'd been holding something too heavy for too long. But he wasn't looking at me. His eyes were fixed on the corner of the room. The empty corner, just two walls meeting, shadow-pooled where the weak ceiling light didn't quite reach. He stared at it like it was the most beautiful, terrifying thing he'd ever seen. And he was smiling. Not like my brother. Not a smirk. Not a laugh. This was slow and wrong, stretching too wide, showing too many teeth. It didn't reach his eyes. His eyes were intense, white, almost shining. "Daniel," I said, or tried to. My voice came out thin, trembling. "What did you do?" He didn't answer me. His lips were moving, but the words weren't for me. They were soft now, almost a murmur. A one-sided conversation with the shadow in the corner. Occasionally he would tilt his head, like he was listening to something responding, something I couldn't hear. A draft slipped past me from the hallway, cool and damp, raising goosebumps along my arms. It curled into the room and seemed to sink into that corner, making the shadows there deepen, until it looked less like absence and more like a presence. I took one step toward him, and my foot hit the edge of the circle. The instant my toes brushed the chalk, the air pressure shifted. My ears popped like I'd changed altitude too quickly. A deep, low vibration rolled through the room. Not quite sound, not quite sensation. My eyes watered. Daniel's head snapped toward me so fast I heard his neck crack. For a second, just one, he saw me. Really saw me. In that second his smile faltered, and sheer, animal terror flashed across his face. His mouth opened. No sound came out. His eyes flicked back to the corner, then to me again, panic rising. Then his expression smoothed out. His shoulders lowered. The wrong smile slid back into place. He turned away from me like I wasn't there and started whispering again to the empty corner. I backed out of the room, slowly at first, then faster. My legs felt like rubber. My heart was pounding so hard my vision blurred around the edges. I grabbed my phone and called Mom, then 911. Then I just sat on the top step, staring at his open door, listening to that soft murmur go on and on and on. The paramedics came. The police. A neighbor poked their head out, curious. There was a blur of questions, bright lights, heavy boots thudding on old wood. He didn't resist when they took him. He walked out of the circle on his own, calm as anything, bare feet leaving faint smudges on the floor. His eyes didn't look at the officers or the walls or me. They kept sliding back to that corner, like there was a hook in them. He hasn't spoken a real word since. 3 years. 3 different facilities. A parade of psychiatrists and neurologists. They say catatonic, disorganized, responsive but nonverbal. They say trauma response and psychotic break. What they don't see is what happens every December 31st. Hospitals have clocks too. They have midnight. They have that same dead space between 11:59 and 00, even if no one's cheering. Every New Year's, they call me. "Your brother had an episode again," they say. Nothing dangerous, just unsettling. I went once, the second year, to see for myself. The ward was warm and smelled like disinfectant and plastic. His room was bare. Just a bed, a chair, a small window looking out onto a courtyard of dead plants. He sat on the bed, knees drawn up, eyes on the far corner of the ceiling. As the digital clock above the door ticked toward midnight, I watched his breathing change. Slow, then faster, then slow again. He licked his lips like they were too dry. His fingers curled in the thin blanket. At 11:59, he started whispering. The same too many consonant words, the same cadence. I felt them like déjà vu, crawling over my skin. When the clock hit midnight, he paused. Then he smiled. The kind of smile that doesn't belong in a place like that, on a face like his with fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. He turned his head just enough to look at the corner. And he whispered, clearly, in a voice I hadn't heard in years, "I'm still here. I haven't gone back for New Year's since." I talk to him on other days. I bring him books which he doesn't read, and clothes he doesn't notice. He sits, he stares, he murmurs things I can't quite catch. I'm telling you this because people treat resolutions like harmless wishes. Like you can say anything you want at midnight and the worst that can happen is you don't stick to it. But there are things, I think, that listen when the world lines up in certain ways. When everyone's shouting and counting and begging for change all at once. My brother tried to force the universe to notice him on a night when it was already listening too closely. It did. So if you ever find yourself desperate enough to try something more than a list on your phone, if you think about lighting candles and drawing circles and saying words you don't understand just because you can't stand your life anymore, remember this. Some windows don't open for you. They open for whatever's on the other side.